and welcome to the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art. NEMA is located on the Utah State University campus right next to the King College of the Arts and was founded in 1982 through the generous donation of the Nora Eccles Treadwell Foundation. NEMA is free of charge and open to the public and offers opportunities to local artists and jobs for attending USU students. Today I'll be guiding you through an exhibit curated by a student of the King College of the Arts. If you'll please follow me. Morgan Ogilvie is an art major working her way towards a graphic design degree at Utah State University. Ogilvie was inspired by the complex history of Christianity in Latin America and wanted to show its effects through the art that was being produced over the course of its art history. Her goal is to have this exhibit of the hybridization of religions be as eye-opening to the public as it was for her while researching it. To the side, you'll see a more detailed writing of her concept with this exhibit. Today's exhibit, Breaker Blend, the exploration of hybridization in New World and Old World religion, showcases select works that show the merging, sometimes called hybridization, of Old World Christianity and New World paganism. This approach shows that these two religions, while dichotomous in nature, have blended together to form a flavor of Christianity that is both unique and very much in line with the experience Latin America had with the colonization process, as well as its still lingering effects. Now, if you'll follow me into the exhibit where we'll be looking at our first stop on this tour. Here we have Coatlicue. Coatlicue is an Aztec earth goddess and mother deity, also known as She of the Serpent Skirt. Coatlicue's moniker can be recognized by the snakes that have been carved to form her dress. Coatlicue is part of the late classical period and is pivotal in the process of the reformation of the Virgin of Guadalupe in colonial Latin America, which we will be visiting soon after this stop. Coatlicue is a fascinating contrast to the Old World Virgin Mary. Both are mother deities, but while Mary has the oxymoron of being both mother and virgin, Coatlicue is mother, warrior, and not only participates in the births of her children, but also has a hand to play in their deaths as well. Coatlicue's nature is that of the very earth and nature. She is a manifestation of nature itself. The deities of the Old World were very much tied to the land itself, and in many different cases represented natural phenomena. Even disasters were personified and made real by the very depictions you see here today. Our next stop will give you an example of such personification. If you'll follow me to the left. Here we have a fresco of the great goddess of Teotihuacan. Now this piece is earlier than Coatlicue by hundreds of years, so we don't have as much of a concrete knowledge of this deity as we do with Coatlicue, as the civilization known to worship her was long gone by the time of the Aztecs. Like what we were talking about with Coatlicue, this fresco has been hypothesized to be both a depiction of a kind of deity, as well as a representation of a nearby dormant volcano. There have been multiple interpretations of this goddess, but the main consensus is that she is both an agricultural goddess as well as a goddess of death and rebirth, much like that of Coatlicue. Taking a look at the mask coming out of her mouth in the hands of her two attendants, it appears as though they are sowing seeds into the ground. But at the same time, the mask coming out of the goddess's mouth could be interpreted as lava. The theme of having a terrifyingly destructive force, such as a volcano, be represented as a goddess of life and death is very fitting, as some of the most fertile soil comes from the aftermath of these eruptions. This could be a personification of a shared communal memory of a volcanic eruption, while also going along with the cyclical theme of early Old World religion. With that in mind, let's now turn our attention to one of the most prolific pieces from the rise of Christianity in the New World. This is the Virgin de Guadalupe. This figure kickstarted the rise of Christianity in the New World. While the original artist of this specific piece is unknown, the Virgin de Guadalupe first came to Mexico via a vision to Juan Diego, which compelled him to build a temple dedicated to her in order to spread the word of Christianity throughout the land. The Virgin of Guadalupe is also known as She Who Crushes the Serpent. In traditional Christian lore, it could be a callback to the snake that lured Adam and Eve out of God's garden, but in the context of Latin America, it is a direct and deliberate callback to Coatlicue, She of the Serpent Skirt. She exists to crush the remnants of the old gods of the New World, and to build a new foundation for Christianity. Yet with this nickname, she will always have a link to the very thing she was created to destroy. From this point on in the tour, we'll be seeing a stronger influence of Christianity and Christian-themed iconography in the art. but it comes as a double-edged sword, in that it also highlights some double standards in the Eurocentric art world. Let's make our way to two such examples. Here on the right, you'll see Santa Rosa of Lima by Melchor Cava. This statue was commissioned by the church to commemorate the very first saint of Latin America, Saint Rosa of Lima. What makes this a sign of the hybridization of Old and New World religion is that one of the most critical steps in establishing a religion in any part of the world seems to involve the converts being able to see themselves represented within it. This statue is a symbol of the merging of the culture and people in Latin America with Catholicism. But even with this being commissioned by the church, for the church, and thus being expected to have aspects and themes that would appeal to European aesthetics, it was still criticized for its similarities to pre-existing work that was done in Europe. Even with the forced indoctrination of Christianity and Eurocentric art ideals in Latin America, it would always be considered lesser than its predecessor. This piece hanging to the left of this statue has a similar conundrum. The Virgin of the Apocalypse on the left is a piece done by Miguel Cabrera, an artist made famous for his casta paintings depicting idealized social and racial hierarchies in the New World. This painting was criticized for its similarities with a pre-existing piece of Christian artwork, in this case, Peter Paul Rubens' The Virgin as the Woman of the Apocalypse. You will recall that Cava received the same accusations of being derivative. While there are noticeable similarities between Cabrera and Rubens, there are also two specific differences: the identity of the woman crushing the head of the serpent, and what the serpent is supposed to represent. The woman is the Virgin of Guadalupe, as opposed to the Virgin Mary, because at this point in time, the Virgin of Guadalupe was far more significant to Latin America than the Virgin Mary. And by that logic, and what we know of the dynamic between the Virgin of Guadalupe and Coatlicue, it would only make sense that the serpent would be Coatlicue. So it's using old world religious imagery to reflect Latin America's developing relationship with Christianity. Now with these two stops in mind, let's continue on to our next stop. The Mexico City Cathedral is a glistening example of how the blending of Latin American paganism and Christianity isn't always visible. The significance of Mexico City Cathedral in Breaker Blend is how and where it was constructed. The Mexico City Cathedral was built by cannibalizing the stone of the Aztec Templo Mayor shortly after the hostile takeover of Tenochtitlan, and it is located right on top of an area sacred to the Aztec religion. Before the colonization of Mexico and Latin America, instead of an area being sacred because of a temple or an altar, such monuments tended to be built on land that was already revered as holy. While its facade and interior are ostensibly Christian, the cathedral will forever be tied to paganism by both the land it rests upon and by the stones it was built from. We will be now jumping forward in time for the next two pieces on our tour, exploring the role of modernism in New and Old World religious hybridization. On the right is Angel Zaraga's Ex Voto San Sebastian. The term ex voto refers to both a heartfelt prayer and an offering to help fulfill the prayer's wish. The making of offerings, while also used in Renaissance Europe to commemorate fulfilled miracles, has paganistic roots when the practice involves paying favors to a deity in order to receive something in return. The heartfelt prayer in the painting can be seen in the bottom right corner, which could be directed to either God or to Saint Sebastian. Saint Sebastian, in most traditional Christian iconography, is depicted as quite beautiful, and the same could be said about Zaraga's rendition. But in this piece specifically, there's a delicate kind of loveliness to Sebastian that is usually reserved for virginal martyr saints, women who were too beautiful for anyone but God, and thus had to die to preserve that purity. The piece treads the line between reverence and blasphemy, with a dichotomy that could be akin to the old gods of the New World, such as a goddess of both life and death. Both of these ideas coexist within Latin America. In juxtaposition to Ex Voto San Sebastian, we have El Flechador by Saturnino Herrán. El Flechador is one of the most explicit in its reference to Latin America's pre-Columbian past by the way the figure in the painting is dressed. The figure in the background could be a callback to a pre-Columbian god or goddess, such as Coatlicue. This piece is not trying to compromise with the ideas of the church, but is instead grappling with the desire to define a new cultural identity from the remnants of both the Old and New World. El Flechador is a fine example of showing this hybridization. And with that final thought in mind, we'll be heading towards our final stop for this tour. If you could please turn your attention to the wall behind you. Here we have our last stop of the evening, and what I feel ties together the idea of the hybridization of the Old and New World religions. All four sides of the building are painted to represent a time in Mexico's history. The side we are focusing on today is the south facade, as it is a perfect representation of this idea. The piece incorporates the aesthetic principles of pre-Columbian primitivism and Christian iconography. While it may be using Christian themes and symbolism, it is so heavily immersed in this pre-Columbian aesthetic sensibilities that it becomes something new in the process. It acknowledges the grievous past of Latin America's colonization in a way that does not glorify the actions of the Church, nor does it elect to ignore it, but rather presents how Mexico and Latin America in general managed to hybridize New World paganism and Old World Christianity into something unique. For better or for worse, the roots and histories of both cultures and religions will forever be blended into its own special religious identity. And with that final piece, we are now at the end of our tour for the evening. I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to experience Break or Blend, the exploration of hybridization in New World and Old World religion. If you should feel so inclined, just outside of the exhibit is an exhibition catalog with all the works you saw here today.